I'm 24 years old and still live with my parents. My family has never been well off, and pretty much all the money I make goes into supporting the household. My relationship with my parents isn't great. We argue quite a lot, and when I'm not working or hanging out with friends, I tend to keep to myself. I don't want to sound like I'm writing a sob story, but truthfully, I've had a rough upbringing. Fitness has always been my escape. It's a healthy way for me to clear my mind from personal stress, and it gives me a good excuse to leave the house. There's a park about a 10-minute drive from home that has an outdoor workout area with pull-up bars, dip bars, and other calisthenic equipment. During the summer, I love going there to work out. Being around nature really helps calm my mind. I prefer going at night because during the day, the park tends to get crowded. One particularly hot summer night, while my parents were in the middle of another argument, I quietly slipped out of the house to go work out. It was sweltering, probably around 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I remember stepping outside into the humid night air and walking toward our beat-up white Corolla parked in the driveway. I started the rickety engine and rolled the windows down, letting the warm summer breeze flow through my hair. When I arrived at the park, I noticed I was the only one there. It was around 10 or 11 p.m. The lot was empty and the park was dead silent. The mix of the beautiful scenery and the thick, steamy air created a surprisingly peaceful atmosphere. Another reason I love this place. It sits atop a hill that overlooks the downtown area, adding a sentimental touch to my nightly visits. I headed to the pull-up bar and began my workout. I don't count reps. I just go until failure, take a short break, then do it again a few more times. At some point between sets, I paused to stretch my arms. But before I could hop back on the bar, I was hit by a strange, indescribable feeling, like something deep inside me urged me to turn around. And standing just 1 foot away from my face was a tall, disheveled-looking man. I screamed and jumped back about 5 feet. He let out this raspy, loud laugh and quickly apologized, saying he didn't mean to scare me. But everything about him felt off. His appearance, his behavior. He was standing so uncomfortably close. Something was clearly wrong with him. I asked why he was standing so close, and he said, "I live here." Then he told me he sees me working out here all the time and asked if I could teach him. I'm a very non-confrontational person, and in that moment, all I wanted was to be left alone. I awkwardly but politely told him I was just going to do a few pull-ups and leave. I got back on the bar and continued my set, but his words stuck in my head. "I see you here all the time." I could feel his eyes burning into the back of my neck, but again, I didn't know how to handle the situation. I wasn't sure what to say or do. Then, something really unsettling happened. Right as I was finishing my set, I heard him mutter my full name. I froze. My blood ran cold. I dropped from the bar and slowly stepped backward. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, eyes wide, smiling in this crazed, almost unnatural way. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. It was that surreal, but my gut told me something was seriously wrong. Without saying another word, I turned and walked briskly back to my car. I could feel his eyes locked on me the entire time. Thankfully, he didn't follow. Just before driving off, I glanced back one last time and saw him hanging from the pull-up bar, trying to do a pull-up. He was in the exact same position I had been. He grabbed the bar, tried to lift himself, failed, and tried again. I drove away without looking back. On the ride home, I kept asking myself, did he really say my name? Was I hallucinating? I tried to brush it off. Eventually I did. The next morning I woke up early for work. I work construction, so I'm usually up before everyone else. That's when I noticed it, an unmarked envelope sitting on the front porch. It had my name on it. I picked it up, figured I'd read whatever was inside during my lunch break. It was another blistering summer day, and during my break I sat in my car, eating my sandwich, and opened the envelope. What I found inside made my stomach drop. 10 printed photos of me. They were all taken without my knowledge. One was of me in my car, another at work. A few were of me working out at the park. I immediately thought of the creepy man from the night before. My nausea returned. I kept flipping through the photos. One was a picture of my house, and the worst one, a photo of me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. I nearly choked on my food. My eyes welled up with tears. I felt violated. I told my boss there was an emergency and left work immediately. He wasn't happy, but I didn't care. I took photos of the pictures and went straight to the police station. I gave them everything and told them about the man in the park. I gave as much detail as I could, and they said they'd investigate. I told my parents about it too. And for the first time in a long time, they actually showed some sympathy, but it didn't end there. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking at our front door. I didn't answer it. I just laid there, heart pounding, imagining the worst. Another day, I found a sticky note on my car window with a heart drawn in Sharpie. I went back to the police. They said they'd be opening a stalking investigation, but I haven't heard anything since. I get it. Without solid proof, it's hard to build a case. This all started about a month ago, and I've been on edge ever since. My parents are trying to find a new place, but with our financial situation, it's not easy. I'll update if anything else happens, but until then, I sleep with one eye open. This happened to me last summer, when I was 22. I wasn't a very outgoing person at the time. If I ever did anything social, it was only because my degenerate friends somehow managed to drag me out of the house. This was supposed to be one of those times. My friend Philip had invited me to a house party around 8 p.m. It was pretty spontaneous, but I had nothing else going on, so I reluctantly agreed. I knew he'd give me crap if I said no. I won't lie. Despite being a bit of an introvert, the idea of being at a party with strangers sounded more appealing than being alone that night. Philip lived a few towns over, so it made more sense for us to drive separately. He gave me the address and I was on my way, but literally the second I turned onto the street, Philip bailed. He texted me that he wasn't coming. Just like that, I was frustrated, rightfully so. How could he ditch me at the last second? So there I was, alone, standing outside a stranger's house, feeling like a complete idiot. But I'd driven all the way there, and I didn't want to waste the night. So I decided to go in anyway. I walked up the front steps and knocked on the door. The host, a guy named Randy, opened it. He greeted me warmly, instantly likable, charismatic and friendly without being over the top. He introduced me around, and to my surprise, things weren't nearly as awkward as I'd expected. People were cool, even though I was just some random guy they didn't know. There were even a few girls I had my eye on. I decided to relax and enjoy the party and hit the booze hard. The night went on, and the party was still going strong well past midnight. But I had definitely overdone it with the drinking. By around 2 a.m., I was feeling dizzy, nauseous, and in desperate need of a break. I went upstairs looking for a bathroom, but they were all taken. The house was deceptively big. Maybe it was the alcohol, but I was literally getting lost in the maze of hallways. Eventually, I found a door that led up to what looked like an attic or storage room. Desperate for a quiet space to recover, I figured it would do. I fumbled around for a light switch. There wasn't one. Definitely an attic. Dust was everywhere. There was a small window in the far corner. I opened it, letting in the cool night breeze. For a solid minute, I genuinely considered throwing up onto the roof. The breeze helped, though, and I just kept my head hanging out the window. It was dark, quiet, peaceful, a welcome contrast to the chaos downstairs. Sometimes all you need is a little fresh air to restore your mind. But just as I was about to close the window and head back, I heard footsteps on the roof. That didn't make any sense. Was I imagining things? Curious and very, very drunk, I climbed out onto the roof. Let's be honest, there's a 0% chance I would have done that sober. I slowly stood up and scanned the area, and then I saw them. In the moonlight, I could make out two masked figures carrying bags emerging from another window. Randy's house was being robbed. I froze. Should I yell? Confront them? Then a scarier thought hit me. What if they were armed? In my clumsy, drunken state, I slipped and scuffed a shingle, loudly. One of them snapped his head in my direction. Our eyes met. He nudged his partner and they both started moving toward me. Adrenaline kicked in. I knew I had to do something. Randy had been so cool to me, and I suddenly felt a weird sense of loyalty. I quietly followed them across the roof, keeping my distance. They were headed toward a sloping area for an easier escape. I reached for my phone to call 911, but in my drunken panic, I dropped it. It hit the roof with a loud clatter. "Who's there?" one of the burglars hissed. Heart pounding, I ducked and looked around. I spotted a loose roof shingle and without thinking, threw it at them. It missed, but the sound startled them. One of them lost his balance and fell off the roof, crashing into the gutter and hitting the ground below. The other burglar panicked, jumped to a nearby tree, and vanished into the night. I rushed to the edge and saw the fallen one groaning on the ground. I needed to tell someone, but before I could head downstairs, I heard sirens in the distance. Someone had already called the cops, probably one of the neighbors. I climbed back into the attic and made my way downstairs, trying to appear calm. The party was still in full swing. No one had any clue what had just happened. I found Randy laughing with some guests. "Randy, you need to call the police. There's been a robbery. I saw them on the roof." His face shifted from amusement to shock. "Are you serious?" he said, rushing to make the call. I explained everything. The mood of the party turned from celebration to concern. Apparently, one of the neighbors had already called the police, ironically for a noise complaint, which turned out to be a stroke of luck. When the police arrived, I led them to the injured burglar. He was arrested on the spot. His partner, though, had escaped. The party ended abruptly. People scattered, lights turned on. I tried my best to act sober, but I was still wobbling a bit. Randy thanked me profusely, still shocked by what had happened. As for me, I was just glad I could help, despite the bizarre and terrifying situation, but that wasn't the end. A few months later, I was at Philip's house, playing video games, when he got a call. It was Randy, inviting us over for a few beers. Up until that point, I hadn't realized the two of them were even that close. When we pulled up to Randy's house, the first thing I noticed was different. The front door and every window looked completely new. I thought maybe I was remembering things wrong, but I could have sworn they were white. Now they were gray, heavy-duty, reinforced. Randy waved us in, and we headed down to the basement. We cracked open some beers and played pool. To my surprise, Randy recognized me immediately and thanked me again for what happened that night. Then he told us something crazy. The burglar who had been caught never gave up the name of his partner. He was now serving a long sentence. The other one? Still missing. But a week after the incident, Randy's family started receiving threatening letters. Some included photos of his family. Obviously, they reported it, but police had no leads. A month later, Randy's mom noticed a suspicious vehicle circling the house at 1 a.m. A few days after that, Randy's dad discovered things had been moved around in their backyard. In response, they upgraded their entire home security system. New doors, new windows, reinforced everything. I was shocked. I had no idea how far this whole situation had spiraled. What I thought had ended that night clearly hadn't. Summer's fast approaching again, and something tells me I'll have another update soon. Summer is the best season by far. That's a belief I'll maintain every day. My love for summer isn't centered on partying or drinking, as you might expect, but on nature, warm weather, and the inseparable outdoors, in my opinion. And I guarantee you that when the heat comes, I spend more time outside than inside. It was a warm evening in mid-June a few summers ago when this happened. I was 18 or 20 at the time. For context, there's a huge nature preserve near my house. When I say huge, I mean it. It's almost 2,000 acres. To this day, there are still parts of it I'm sure I've never explored. Two friends and I agreed to camp overnight in the woods. Technically, camping there was strictly prohibited and almost illegal, but we figured there was no way anyone would catch us in this dense forest. We just needed to get as deep as possible. Chuck was the biggest camping enthusiast in our group. Tell you, this kid loves to cosplay as a Boy Scout and probably knows almost everything, 100 different knots. Our other friend Jackson always had drinks. If he wasn't drunk, he wasn't happy. That's how things went when Jackson was involved. I remember the feeling of a gentle summer breeze blowing through my hair as the three of us packed up Jackson's car. The weather was perfect, not too cold, not too hot. A few beers later, the three of us found ourselves carrying camping gear through the woods around 12:30 a.m. Honestly, I could feel the alcohol taking its toll as we walked. Chuck always carries an industrial-grade flashlight with him, so the darkness of the forest wasn't a big deal. As much as I enjoy the outdoors, traversing dense woods at this hour was a bit scary, even with Chuck's flashlight. After almost half an hour of walking straight ahead, the three of us found ourselves in a small, flat clearing that was the ideal spot to set up camp. We set up our tents as Chuck instructed and set up our chairs. A campfire was the next step. Chuck once again took the lead, and after a few more minutes, we had a decent fire going. Jackson reached for his bag and handed me another drink. He then grabbed his JBL speaker and started playing music. The atmosphere was perfect, and we were sure to. We'd been talking and drinking for about 2 hours. We were all pretty drunk by then, and I could tell my two friends were almost ready to pack up for the night. Jackson turned down the music and started gathering up the used beer cans. Just then, a deafening whistle pierced the silence. I nearly jumped out of my seat, going from drunk to hyper-alert in a matter of seconds. I don't know how to describe it. It was incredibly loud, but it still carried far away. Jackson quickly turned off the speakers, and the three of us sat in silence as we exchanged concerned glances. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my chest. We sat there frozen in place for what seemed like an eternity, listening intently to our surroundings, but there was nothing. It felt almost quieter now than when we first arrived, like an eerie silence, lacking even the normal jungle sounds you'd expect. I used the time to replay the memory of the whistle in my head. It definitely wasn't an animal sound. The best way I could describe it was the standard whistle you'd hear at a football stadium. Chuck finally broke the silence, calmly urging us to pack up and leave. Jackson. I didn't agree with that plan, even though we might run the risk of encountering whoever was making the noise, which I was deeply afraid of. It was past 3 a.m., and meeting this late could only mean trouble. Chuck hypothesized that whoever was making the noise might be aware of our presence, which was a terrifying thought. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, staying put violated every survival instinct I had. Packing up and leaving at this hour didn't seem much better, though we ultimately agreed to wait. I went to put out the fire, but Chuck warned me against it, saying it would scare away dangerous animals. Only then did I realize the gravity of the situation. We were literally miles from any civilization. It was 3 a.m., and there was an unknown entity somewhere in the darkness. Another 10 minutes or so passed, and we continued talking, but at a much lower volume, without music. I don't think any of us felt safe sleeping that night. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something small fly through the darkness onto Jackson's shoulder and land right in the fire. It was a firecracker. I screamed as it started to sparkle in the flames, and Chuck cursed as he jumped out of his chair and ran into the darkness. Jackson and I hurried after him, abandoning all our belongings. We caught up with Chuck, his flashlight flashing wildly through the woods as he ran frantically. We ran until we couldn't keep up, and Jackson coughed and vomited. Chuck turned off the light, and the three of us stood there panting, trying to figure out if we were being followed. To my surprise, no one seemed to be following us. I don't think I've ever been so scared. But why in the world would someone do that? We needed to figure out what to do. Jackson just wanted to find his way out of the woods and never come back, but Chuck was reluctant to leave all his camping gear behind. Plus, he reminded us that the fire was still burning. I was stunned. How could he care about the forest fire after what had just happened? I finally agreed with Chuck that we should at least check the area. After all, no one was actually chasing us, so there was a slim chance that whoever threw the firecrackers was just playing a cruel joke. Chuck was a master navigator and could actually track our tracks. I could see the glow of the fire as we approached quietly. But before I could get any closer, Jackson put his hand in front of me and pointed with a look of horror on his face. I squinted to see the scene in the distance. What I saw was perhaps the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. There were 3 people sitting motionless in our chairs like statues. The faces I could see were lifeless and their mouths were wide open. I was afraid to move. What are they doing? I thought. Realizing they weren't even talking, this wasn't normal. The 3 of us watched for a moment longer before deciding to retreat. We turned to leave, but Jackson's foot caught on a rock, causing him to curse in frustration. Within seconds, the light from the fire suddenly went out, as if shrouded in a cloak. It was incredibly fast. We didn't stay another second. We ran away from the site once again, but this time we could hear footsteps pounding behind us. We didn't stop this time. We ran out of the woods and ran all the way to Jackson's car. Miraculously, we weren't followed out of the woods. Neither of us spoke on the way back, each of us lost in thought. The next day, Chuck insisted we return to the site during the day to retrieve his belongings. Jackson was completely unwilling to do so, but I agreed to accompany Chuck. After some searching, we finally found a site that seemed largely untouched. That was until we got a little closer and noticed a foul odor coming from Chuck's tent. He opened it, and we found a dead, rotting rat. It was disgusting. I took the hint and never returned to that preserve.